They laughed when the bride was auctioned in chains, until a lonely rancher said, "My son needs you." The wind moved slow across the dusty yard of Rivertown. The sun had not fully risen, but already the air felt heavy, not with heat, but with something colder, something still and watching. Beyond the wooden fence, the land stretched out empty. Nothing moved except the dry weeds that whispered against the fence posts. It was the kind of morning when even the birds stayed silent. Jacob Reeve stood alone near the edge of the auction circle. He wore his father's coat, long and patched. His boots were cracked at the heels. A wide hat shaded his tired eyes, but nothing could hide the years etched into the corners. He was a rancher, yes, but more than that, a man hollowed out by time, by loss, and by the silence of his own home. Behind him, tied to the post, his 12-year-old son sat on the wagon bench, pale, thin, holding a half-eaten biscuit in one hand and a folded sketch of a woman in the other. The boy didn't speak much anymore. Voices rose in the square. The town had gathered, not for cattle or grain, but for women. Dirty chains clinked, laughter rang out, and then, from the back of a covered wagon, they dragged her out. She was young, wrapped in a soiled white dress, shackles on her ankles, her wrists raw from rope. Her hair fell over her face, but when the sheriff pulled it back, her eyes didn't flinch. They were wide open, blue, like a lake that had seen war. "She's the last one," someone shouted. "Stubborn as a mule. Good hips, though." Laughter followed, mocking, loud, the kind of sound that meant to break a spirit. Jacob didn't laugh. He watched her carefully. Not her beauty. That wasn't what he saw. What he noticed was her silence, the way she didn't beg, didn't look away, didn't cry. She simply stood, even as her knees shook, with the calm of someone who had already lost everything once. The sheriff raised a hand. "Starting at 2 shillings. One man offered 3, just for sport. Another joked about turning her into a housemaid. Jacob turned to his son. The boy held the sketch tighter. And then Jacob spoke, loud enough for all to hear. "I'll take her." The laughter stopped. "I said, I'll take her," he repeated. "My son needs her." Heads turned. The woman looked up, for the first time. And in that one moment, in the middle of that silent, watching crowd, something passed between the chained bride and the hollow man with a quiet boy. Not a promise, not a rescue, but the beginning of something neither of them knew how to name. The wagon rolled slow along the broken road, the woman sitting in the back, chained no longer, but still stiff like she expected to be struck at any moment. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, though her knuckles were bruised and fingers swollen. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't speak. Not even once. Jacob drove in silence. The reins rested loose in his hands. His son sat beside him, eyes flicking between the stranger in the back and the horizon ahead. She hadn't even flinched when he cut the rope from her wrists, hadn't spoken when he told the sheriff to leave her name alone. She climbed into the wagon as if stepping into a grave. A few miles passed like that. Dry wind, turning wheels. No words. Then, at a bend in the trail where an old tree leaned toward the road, Jacob pulled the wagon to a stop. He turned on the bench and looked at her. "You got a name?" The woman didn't answer. She didn't even blink. "I'm not asking to own you. I can't call you nothing. Still nothing." He sighed, looked away. Jacob remembered a night long ago. Too long. When he came home from town and found his wife curled at the bottom of the stairs. Her face had been turned to the wall. Her breath, faint, a bruise on her collarbone, blooming like a flower in shadow. She hadn't spoken for 3 days after that, and when she finally did, it wasn't to him. That silence had stayed with him, like a ghost that lived in the corners of the house. He glanced at the woman again. She sat the same way, hurt, hiding, but proud. It would be easier to turn around. Let the sheriff take her back. He hadn't signed anything, hadn't even paid. He could still undo it. She'd said nothing, asked for nothing. And yet, Jacob stepped down from the wagon, walked slowly around to the back. The dry earth crunched beneath his boots. He didn't climb up, just stood there, looking at her from below, hat in his hand. "My boy don't talk much," he said. "Ain't since his ma died." Still she stared, unmoving. "I thought maybe," his voice faltered, "maybe having someone around, someone who knows what quiet feels like." The breeze shifted. Her hair moved just slightly. Not enough to mean anything, but Jacob noticed. He looked down at his boots. "I ain't asking you to cook, or clean, or be a wife. I'm asking if you want a place that don't hurt." He waited. The woman looked away, but she didn't get down. That was enough. He gave a small nod, climbed back up, and tapped the reins. The wagon moved forward again, toward the hills, toward the cabin, toward something neither of them could quite name. Behind him, the woman sat just a little straighter. Not healed, not whole, but maybe beginning. 3 days passed. She didn't speak, but she moved. She cleaned the boy's scraped elbows after a fall. She swept the dust from the corners of the cabin. She peeled potatoes without being asked. Jacob didn't press. He watched. The boy, Sam, had started leaving his drawings on the kitchen table. The woman would look at them in silence. One day, she folded one and placed it under a tin cup so the wind wouldn't carry it away. Sam noticed. He didn't say a word. But that night, he left another sketch. Jacob thought maybe, just maybe, they were all beginning to breathe again. But peace in the west was a thin sheet over. Shitter splinters. It came in the form of a rider, dust trailing behind like smoke, hard eyes, a silver ring on every finger. He didn't come to talk. He came to ask. "Man here bought something that wasn't his to keep." Jacob stood with the axe still in his hand, not raising it, just holding it, head low. "I took her in. Ain't nobody stopped me." "She's tagged," the man said, tossing a folded slip of paper onto the porch. It fluttered like a dead bird. "Marked under Delaney Trade. You got no right." Jacob didn't move. The rider smiled. "You're harboring debt. And property. I see a person, that's all." The man's smile vanished. "She ain't yours to rescue." Jacob waited until he was gone. The dust hadn't settled before he turned to her. She stood just inside the door, pale, eyes locked on the horizon. "You knew they'd come?" he asked. She didn't answer, but her shoulders dropped just slightly. "You were marked?" She nodded once. He sat on the steps, hands in his lap. "You gonna tell me what this is?" The silence between them cracked, like a frozen pond beneath weight. "My father owed them," she said, her voice no louder than wind in dry grass. "Gambled away everything. Then he sold me, to cover the rest." Jacob looked up. She didn't cry. She just stared at the place the rider had gone. "Why'd you let me take you then?" She met his eyes, finally. "Because I thought maybe your silence would hurt less than theirs." Jacob rose slowly, his knees stiff from too many seasons. "They'll be back," he said. "And next time, they won't talk." She didn't move. "I'll send you to the mountains. To a friend." "No." "You'll be safe there." "No," she said again, voice flat. "You want to die here?" She looked past him, toward the barn. Sam's drawings still danced in the doorway. "I want to stay where I was seen." The wind had picked up. The light was turning yellow at the edge of dusk. In the distance, the sound of hooves echoed faintly. Not one this time, but several. "They're coming," Jacob said. She nodded once. He stepped inside, took down the old rifle from above the mantel, loaded, shells by hand. This wasn't his war, wasn't his debt. But she had chosen to stay, and now they were all in danger. The days that followed were filled with quiet work and quieter glances. She rose before the sun now. The kettle whistled before the rooster crowed. She mended Sam's worn sleeves, her fingers moving gently over each fray. When she thought no one was looking, she would pause, hold the fabric to her face just for a second. Then, keep stitching. Jacob began clearing the field behind the barn. She joined him without being asked, lifting stones, her hands blistered but steady. No one said much, but things passed between them. Silent offerings. A cup of water placed gently by the fence. A piece of bread broken and shared under a tree. Sam, once withdrawn, now followed her like a shadow, clutching his sketches. She never praised them, just looked at each one like it mattered. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Jacob pulled out the old hunting rifle. He looked at her across the firelight. "You ever shot before?" She shook her head. "Want to learn?" She hesitated, then nodded. He showed her how to hold it, how to breathe before the trigger, how not to flinch when it kicked back. Her hands were unsteady, but her eyes never wavered. She missed the first shot, flinched on the second, but on the third, hit a tin can clean off the fence post. She didn't smile, but something in her shoulders loosened, like an old rope falling from a beam. Later that night, while Sam slept, they sat on the porch. A storm rolled far in the distance. Thunder barely touched the earth. Jacob lit a small lantern and placed it between them. He spoke first. "My wife died slow. Sickness." Took her voice first, then her eyes, then everything else. The woman said nothing. "She used to sit right here, same spot as you. Watched the clouds roll in like they were old friends." He paused, looking at the lantern flame. "You?" She drew in a long breath. "They locked me in a cellar," she said, "to punish my father. I was 16. Jacob didn't ask more, didn't need to. She leaned forward, sleeves falling back to reveal the pale rings of healed rope burns. He didn't stare, just looked once, then looked away. The storm never broke. It stayed in the distance, like a memory that no longer reached the ground. Before going inside, Jacob placed the rifle by the door and set an extra blanket on her cot. She looked at him. "What if they come tomorrow?" He looked back, his voice steady. "Then we stand. Not as man and wife, not as savior and saved, but as two people who had bled in different ways, now finding a kind of stillness in the same place." In the flicker of the lantern, in the soft scratch of Sam's pencil in the next room, in the soft murmur of wind in the rafters, a quiet bond formed. And it felt like the hour before battle, the only peace either of them had ever known. They came just after sunrise. 6 horses, 4 riders, 1 wagon with an iron cage in the back. Their coats were dark, guns visible. Not lawmen, worse, private enforcers. The kind who weren't bound by rules, just payment. Jacob stood on the porch, the rifle leaning against the wall beside him. Sam was inside. The woman stood at the kitchen window, motionless. The lead rider dismounted, boots crunching over gravel. Same silver rings on his fingers, same cold eyes. "You had time to think," he said, "but you made the wrong choice." Jacob didn't speak. He shifted slightly, one hand near the rifle, the other calm at his side. "She's branded. Belongs to Delaney Holdings," the man continued. "Her old man sold her life away. Paperwork's clean. You think I care about paper? No, but I think you care about the boy." That changed everything. Jacob stiffened. The man nodded to one of his rider, who reached into the wagon and pulled out something small, a handkerchief. Sam's. It had his sketch stitched into it, a symbol only he used. Jacob's jaw clenched. "You sent someone to the schoolhouse?" he asked quietly. "No," the man said. "We sent someone into your home. You were too busy pretending she was yours." Inside the cabin, Sam peeked from the curtain. The woman reached for him, her hand gently on his shoulder, shielding him back from the window. "You came for her," Jacob said, voice cold. "We came for what was bought," the man snapped. "But now we take interest." Jacob stepped off the porch. Not fast. Calm. "I ain't giving her back. She's not yours. She chose to stay. That ain't how the world works. Then maybe it needs breaking." The rifle lifted, just a little. One of the enforcers moved, quick, but Jacob was quicker. The shot rang out sharp in the morning stillness, and the rider fell from his horse. The others drew. From inside the house, another shot rang. The second man staggered, hit in the leg. The woman stood in the doorway now, Jacob's backup rifle in her grip. Her face was pale, but her hands didn't shake. The leader stepped back, wide-eyed. "She don't even belong to you," he barked. "She don't belong to you either," Jacob said, taking aim again. "She belongs to herself." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, thick with something sacred. The leader looked at her. "Is that true?" She nodded. "You can take my body, you already did. But this," she touched her chest, "this part ain't yours no more." That was when the rider reached for his pistol. Jacob didn't hesitate. The blast knocked him back. The rifle clattered to the ground. His body hit the dirt hard. The woman screamed. Sam ran to the door. She fired. The final rider fled. Only smoke and blood remained. She rushed to Jacob's side. His shirt darkened fast. "I ain't leaving," he gasped. "Not while you and the boy still need me." She pressed her hands over the wound. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please." His eyes blinked slow. His fingers found her. "You chose to stay, so I chose you." And then silence again. But not empty this time. Full of love. Full of sacrifice. The dust settled slow over the field, like ash after a fire. The man with the silver rings lay slumped beside his horse, his weapon inches from his hand. His eyes were open, but no longer seeing. The others were either gone or broken, scattered like the lies they carried. The woman knelt beside Jacob, her palms pressed against his chest, now soaked in red. The wound wasn't deep enough to kill him outright, but it was deep enough to silence his strength. Sam knelt on the other side, his small hands trembling as he held a folded drawing, the one he had made of her the day she arrived. Jacob's breath came slow. The pain was real, but it was not sharp anymore. He blinked at the sky. The morning light had broken through the clouds. It felt strange, warm somehow. She didn't speak, only held his hand tight, her face streaked with silent tears. He didn't need her words. Her grip said enough. They waited there for a long time. No one moved. No one dared speak. Even the wind held still. Later, she helped him inside. She cleaned his wound, wrapping it with quiet care. He didn't wince, not even once. Sam brought water, blankets. He sat by his father's side through the night, resting his head against his arm, not letting go. Outside, the bodies were gone, buried beneath the old oak behind the barn. She had done it alone, with her own hands. No cross, no stone, just soil. She washed her hands in the river, and never spoke of that morning again. In the days that followed, Jacob did not rise from his bed, but he healed, slowly, each breath steadier than the last. She never left his side. At night, when the boy slept, she would sit near the hearth, eyes tracing the flames. Sometimes she would sew, Sometimes she would just hold the old rifle across her knees, staring at it like it had more stories to tell. One evening, Jacob opened his eyes and whispered, "They'll come again." She didn't look at him. "Let them," she said. He smiled. Not with his mouth, with his whole face. Outside, the wind picked up again. But this time, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like something passing through, something finished. The house didn't feel like a place of fear anymore. It felt like a place where pain had been met, faced, answered. The chain that once held her had been thrown into the river. Sam had watched her do it. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. In the field behind the house, the tin cans still hung on the fence posts. She still practiced. 1 shot a day. No more, no less. The woman who had once been sold in chains now stood steady, quiet, unshaken. And Jacob, the man who had once believed he was too broken to give love, now knew different. Sometimes rescue doesn't come in the form of horses and guns. Sometimes it comes in the way someone washes your blood without fear. Sometimes it comes in the way a boy hands you a picture of yourself, as if to say, "I see you." Winter came gentle that year. The snow fell soft over Rivertown, covering the fields like a fresh sheet pulled over an old scar. No one came looking anymore. Not for the woman, not for the land, not for trouble. Word had spread, quiet and quick, that Jacob Reeve was not a man to be tested again, and that the girl once auctioned in chains now carried a rifle and a fire in her spine. Inside the cabin, the air stayed warm, not from the fire alone, but from something else, the slow building of a family that hadn't started with blood, but with choice. Jacob healed, not just the wound, but the years before it. He walked slower now, spoke even less than before. But when he looked at her, his eyes held something softer, something grateful. Sam began to speak again. Not much, but enough. He called her Ma one morning while handing her a drawing. She didn't answer with words, just knelt down, pulled him close, and held him until the fire burned low. She planted at a tree behind the barn, where the men had been buried, a mark not for them, but for herself, proof that life could grow where pain once stood. Jacob built a bench beneath it, facing west. They sat there often, in silence, watching sunsets like old friends. No papers were signed, no rings exchanged, but everything about them said, home. One evening, a rider passed by, just a traveler looking for a place to water his horse. He paused at the fence, nodding at the boy, then at the woman carrying firewood with steady arms. He looked at Jacob. "Is that your wife?" Jacob glanced toward her, then back at the man. "No," he said. "That's the woman who stayed." The man tipped his hat and rode on. Years later, when Sam grew tall and strong, he still kept her first drawing folded in his pocket. It had no colors, just lines, a face, a quiet woman with her hair covering one eye. He said it reminded him that silence wasn't always sadness. Sometimes it was just the sound of healing. The cabin still stood. The bench aged with the seasons. The rifle above the door gathered dust, and when strangers asked about the woman who lived there, the townsfolk would say, "She was once auctioned in chains, but now she plants trees." And though no one ever heard her laugh loudly, the house was full of peace, the kind that only grows where pain has been listened to, not erased.